Well, welcome back to New Venture Creation. Again, I'm Neil Fogarty, and I'm going to be talking today about a really key aspect of what is the foundation of success for most businesses. And that aspect is, what's your value proposition? What's your strategic position? And this you'll find in Chapter 8 of our textbook. There are only two main topics here. So it sounds like, oh, only two topics, and the other chapters usually have three or four or whatever. So, okay, it's only two. It has to be an easy chapter. I'm not sure if it's easy, but I do know it's important. And it's also one of those topics that really successful businesses understand, whether they identify it or not, they understand it. Where a lot of businesses don't even think about it, and as I say, oftentimes don't understand it as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to, as I say, we have two main topics that we're going to take a look at. And the first topic is this concept of strategic positioning. Strategic positioning. And I know in class, in some earlier chapters, we've talked about strategy and about positioning, etc. This kind of fills in some of the gaps, and it certainly makes some reference to those earlier topics. So let's take a look at this concept of strategic positioning. Michael Porter, who is a professor at Harvard, a business professor at Harvard, really good one, and really knows his stuff with regard to strategy and businesses, etc. He's written all sorts of books and articles you can imagine. And the interesting thing about his, compared to so many college profs who write, they write things that, frankly, nobody reads. But Michael Porter's stuff, the stuff he writes, is so important, and it's usually really practical that, believe me, people in business actually read it. So with regard to Michael Porter, one of the articles that he wrote, and you'll find it in the materials on our Canvas website, is called the heart of strategy. You know, what it's called, What is Strategy, and it talks about the heart of strategy. And again, it's by Michael Porter. And a couple of things that are in this article, certainly you want to read that. It's a short article. Definitely want to take a look at what we have on the website for you. He says that the strategic goal of most businesses, not a business goal. Business goal, let's make some more profit, let's increase our market share and things of that nature. He says strategic goal, if not the strategic goal, and we've mentioned this in earlier classes as well, is to position your business for success. Position your business for success by giving it a competitive advantage, one that hopefully it can sustain. You want to position your business for success by giving it a competitive advantage, one that hopefully it can sustain. I want you to think about this. The odds are, if you're a student, you go to many of the career fairs that are offered here at Penn State, and you go to those career fairs, and there's all sorts of booths and tables and all sorts of different employers that are there, lots and lots of students all seeking out jobs. But basically, why do you go to a career fair? Well, you want to meet people, right? You want to see if there are opportunities. You want to learn things. Basically, what you're trying to do is you're trying to position yourself for success, at least with your, getting a job and, starting a career or anything. You're trying to position yourself for success. And you don't want to just be successful. Oh, we hired you to go work for us this summer. Particularly if you're graduating, you want that job to last for a long, long period of time. You want to be able to sustain the strategic position that you have. You want to sustain this competitive advantage that you have. Now, if you think about it, another key aspect of strategy, and we I think talked a little bit about this maybe in chapter 1 or 2, is this concept that you can come up with the world's best strategy. How am I going to get from here to there? What are my goals? What are my objectives? Drawing a map and a line and all that other stuff. But if you think about it, if you have the world's best strategy, it's almost worthless unless you do something with it, right? And to do something with it, it's not just put it on a shelf someplace or in a drawer and come back to it later. It's to implement it, to execute the strategies that you have. I think we talked about this in an earlier class. Oftentimes on New Year's Eve, people come out with all these wonderful resolutions that next year they're going to be better in 5,000 different ways, and they're not going to do all these bad things, and are going to do all these good things. And what tends to happen? Well, a couple days into the year, they start doing all the bad things and stop doing all the good things, etc., that were on their list. So what good was that New Year's Eve resolution? Well, maybe it was good for a day or two, but it really wasn't good for the long term, didn't really help them out. Well, with regard to a strategy, it's the same thing. You want to actually do something about it. If you have a resolution, say I'm not going to, I'm going to watch my weight and I'm going to exercise more and I'm not going to lose my temper this year or whatever, you want to implement that throughout the next year. You want to watch what you eat, you want to exercise more, you want to control your temper that you have. So this concept of implementation of strategies, also known as execution, very important. The word implement or implementation, execute, strategies, etc. Those are all kind of buzzwords that you want to know. Now, along this line, so we're saying, okay, strategies are important. The really most important part might be to execute them, but we've got to have that strategy. You've got to figure out where we are, where we're going, how we're going to get there. Along that line, most businesses, whether they recognize it or not, have strategies. And every business has different strategies, and the number of strategies in the world is like the number of pebbles on a beach or whatever. But interestingly enough, most businesses generally follow 3 to 5 strategies. In fact, so many of them follow those strategies. They're known as, here's a buzzword for you, buzz phrase, they're known as generic strategies. Generic strategies. Your textbook will talk about 4 generic strategies, and then it will have a 5th, which is kind of a hybrid of some of them. So we're going to talk about the 4 as well as the 5th, about the hybrid that we have. Now, when we take a look at these, first let me identify what they are. We'll go into greater depth. And then I have a comment or two about them. So let's take a look at the 5. One of these strategies, generic strategies, is called cost leadership. Cost leadership. Another of these generic strategies is known as differentiation. Differentiation. Some people call it product differentiation, but oftentimes you can differentiate yourself in other ways other than just your product. So I'll just call it differentiation. I think your textbook does too. Another of the strategies, the 3rd of the generic strategies, is called focused differentiation. It's kind of what we just said, but notice the word focus is a little bit different. And then the 4th and the final of the 4 is focused cost leadership. Focused cost leadership. We talked about cost leadership before. Now we're talking about focused cost leadership. And again, the 5th of these is a hybrid, some sort of mixture of a little bit of this and a little bit of that, etc. A hybrid. One of the things I'll mention to you is, as we go through these strategies, we're going to talk a little bit about each of them. As we go through these strategies, what businesses should do in choosing what strategy to follow, what you should do in choosing what strategy to follow, and whatever businesses you have or may start, is you want to find the strategy that fits the best, the strategy that fits the best. And let me just give you 2 examples here. With regard to 2 competitors in the PC market, the computer market, etc., the personal computer market. And 2 of them, 2 fairly successful ones, are Apple and Dell. They follow 2 completely different strategies. Apple pretty much follows a differentiation strategy. Dell pretty much follows a cost leadership strategy. And as we talk about a little bit later, you're going to see they're not the same. They're not the same strategy. And yet, both of them are fairly successful in the same industry, in the same marketplace. And you can say, why? Why can one strategy be successful here, but a completely different strategy be successful there? And that is, you have to find a strategy, and here's a buzzword for you. You have to find a strategy that fits. It has to fit your company, has to fit the internal resources, has to fit the external environment. It has to fit your company. So a key point here, and another buzzword here, is not only do we want to choose at least one of these strategies, we want to find the one that fits. And then, of course, we want to go ahead and implement it. So let's talk about each of these strategies a little bit in greater depth. Let's go to cost leadership first. Cost leadership. Under cost leadership, this looks at productivity improvements and process enhancements. productivity improvements and process enhancements to lower your firm's costs and expenses. To lower your firm's costs and expenses. We always do things this way. I found a better way to do it, and by doing this new way, etc., it's going to cost us a little bit less. We're going to be more productive with the monies that we have and the monies that we invest, etc. So what we tend to see is this is called productivity improvements or process enhancements. I'm enhancing the process in some way, and by doing that, I'm making some improvements for productivity. One of the things that your textbook mentions is that for new businesses, and again, this is more of an entrepreneurial course, for new businesses, this strategy might not be a very good one. Because think about it, you're just starting out, so it's really hard to enhance your processes. You don't have any. And it's also harder then to become more productive. You're still trying to figure out how to bake a pizza, and you're not at the point of trying to figure out how to bake a pizza and have the baking cost cheaper, enhance the process and become more productive. So new businesses, probably not the best strategy. I'm not saying it doesn't fit all new businesses, but it doesn't fit most new businesses, at least according to your author, and I agree with that. Now, there's an interesting problem, too, that's associated with this strategy. A lot of businesses indeed do follow this strategy. Yes, keep our costs down, keep our costs down. Not a bad idea, right? You don't want to do something and be splurging all the time and have inefficient costs or whatever that you have. But one problem is you can focus so extensively on keeping costs and expenses down that your quality is going to go down too. Oh, I can cut costs left and right, and all of a sudden the product I'm making is pretty cheap and not very durable, etc. The quality has gone down. There was a case that I've talked about in some other classes. One of the big three automakers in the United States back, I think it was sometime in the 1980s, it had some problems. The 1970s were a tough time for automobile companies in the United States, and this one had tough times too. So they got rid of their current CEO and they hired a new one, so put somebody new in there. And they actually put somebody new in there who had been with the company for some time. They promote from within. And this person that they put in there had pretty much been an accountant and then the accounting side of this company the entire time, kind of going up through the accounting silo. So as an accountant, he knew about such things as cost accounting, and he knew how important it was to see how much things cost and all these other things like that. So he was focused on lowering costs. Well, one of the big problems that this company ran into is he did lower the costs, but the cars and other vehicles they made became really cheap. Well, they didn't charge a cheap amount for it, mind you, but the quality got bad. Consumers didn't like that. They actually started buying other cars and trucks and whatever from other manufacturers because the quality was so bad here. So on the one hand, you can do a great job in keeping the costs down, but be careful that you don't go too far, because if you start cutting quality and also safety corners or whatever, that can come back to certainly haunt you. Now, the last thing I want to mention about this cost leadership example, and maybe give you a couple of company names that follow it, is think about this. If you're successful here, if you're able to lower your costs and lower your expenses, this can lead to at least two good options for you. And you might go for one or the other, or most companies probably go for a combination of both. If, let's say, for example, you're making a pizza. Let's say you're in the pizza business, and let's say that currently you and most of your competitors, you're in a college town, you charge a fairly inexpensive price for, say, a large plain pizza. Let's say you charge $10. In some college towns it's going to be half that, and others it's going to be higher. Let's just say it's $10. And let's say that that's your price for it. Let's say your cost to make that pizza is $5, right? So great, okay, it cost me $5, I sell it for $10, I've got a profit margin of $5, I'm doing pretty good for each pizza I sell that I have. Let's say that, and that's what your competition has, roughly the same thing. They're all selling it for around $10 and it costs them all about $5. Well, let's say that you figure out a better way to make a pizza. You design your own new machine, or you do something or other, and all of a sudden your cost to make this pizza, instead of being $5, your cost is $3. So what options does that give you? It was 5, and you had that profit margin to, sold it for 10, cost you 5, you made $5 in profit. Now, right now, we're still selling it for 10, it's costing you 7. So one of the nice things about that is you can increase your profit margin per item, right? You've lowered the cost, for each pizza, down to $3. So now my profit margin per pizza is 7 as opposed to 5. So for every pizza I sell, I'm making more money. Not a bad thing. Another thing you could do is, particularly if you're in a price-conscious environment where your purchasers, your customers are, don't have a whole lot of money, or even if they do, they're always looking for the best deal or whatever. If you can lower your cost down to down to 3, and all your competitors, their cost is 5, well, you could actually go out, you could sell your pizza, it costs you 3, you could sell your pizza for $4. Your competitors can't sell it for $4 unless they're going to lose $1 on every pizza. You can sell it for $4, and now your customers are all happy. They're coming to you, you're cheaper, whatever, and you're still making $1 a pizza. So one of the things you can do is you can also lower prices. So the two options you can have higher margins, profit margins per item, or you can lower your prices that you have. And many businesses might cut the difference, and we'll lower prices a little bit, but we're still going to shoot for a fairly decent margin, etc. But if you're good at doing this, those are two good options to have. Now, I'll give you names of 2 companies that do this. One, you can imagine, is going to be Walmart. Walmart has found a way, to keep its costs fairly low compared to, the other, big box stores or whatever that are out there. And because of that, Walmart can offer, at least in theory, lower prices, and still it can have some pretty high margins with regard to that. Another example is McDonald's. McDonald's has found out, ways to make, hamburgers and other things like that very cheaply, insofar as the price. And their competition, can't get it down that well. So what we see at McDonald's is McDonald's tends to be a little lower priced than, a lot of the pizza shops that are out there. Hamburger shops that are out there, particularly the mom and pop ones that are out there. And also, their prices might be a little bit lower than some places, but on the other hand, they still have some pretty good margins. So what we see is cost leadership has helped both Walmart and McDonald's. Well, let's go to the second of these 4 to 5 generic strategies, and that's differentiation. Differentiation. And again, I'll make reference to Michael Porter. Michael Porter really likes this strategy of differentiation, and he wrote that article referenced earlier, What is Strategy?, which I really suggest that you read. It's not a long one, and I believe it's in the materials that we have on the web, or there's a link to the website to get it, etc. It's definitely worth a read. Basically, what he says here with regard to differentiation, this is finding ways to solve your customers' problems. Finding ways to solve your customers' problems that are unique and different from your competition. Finding ways to solve your customers' problems that are unique and different from your competition. So, for example, if everybody out there is, go back to the PC market or whatever, if everybody out there is making computers that are either made of tan plastic or made of black plastic, and you start coming out with computers that are made with, blue plastic and red plastic or whatever, and you're selling, blueberry iMacs and strawberry iMacs or whatever. Well, until somebody else copies you or whatever, you're the only one doing it. So you're different, you're unique. And if you have some customers out there who are absolutely tired of always buying a black or an almond computer, there's only one place for them to go. They're going to go to you because you're different, at least until someone copies you. So one of the things you can see is this differentiation that you have, this way of being unique from the others, this can lead to a competitive advantage. Oh, nobody else is making a blue computer, and Apple's making iMacs or something. This is back in the 90s or whatever, that are blue and tangerine and strawberry colored, whatever. For a while, at least in that segment of the market, for people who wanted colored computers, you've got it. So you have a competitive advantage. Now, there is something, though, to keep in mind. And notice something I said earlier. You have this competitive advantage until other people start copying you. Once they start to copy you, and now we have other computer companies making blue computers and tangerine computers or whatever, once they start to copy you, you've got an interesting issue. You're no longer the only one. So if somebody wants a blue computer, they don't just have to go to Apple. They can go to Compaq, or they can go to somebody else, etc., that's making computers using a different color plastic. So if your competition can copy you fairly easily or fairly inexpensively, the competitive advantage you had, at least initially being the only one selling blue computers, the competitive advantage is going to pretty much fade away. You might have somewhat sustainability. Okay, you're first on the market, people remember the name more or whatever, but the whole competitive advantage you had is going to pretty much fade away. This should remind you of something we talked about in an earlier chapter, that Wendy's case about drive-through windows and Wendy's, and how that gave them made them different, gave them a competitive advantage. And of course, what the other hamburger joints do, they put in drive-through windows too. So the question of being able to sustain your competitive advantage, to keep it going, has a lot to do with, can it be copied? If it can be copied, your competitive advantage can fade away. It can kind of be killed. And I liken that in that earlier case to how do you kill a werewolf? At least according to folklore, you kill a werewolf with a silver bullet. So if I asked you, what is the silver bullet to killing a competitive advantage? It's allowing someone to copy you. Now, there are some ways to try to keep people from copying you: trademarks, copyrights, patents, etc., trade secret agreements. All those things can try to help. Another thing you can try to do to make sure that nobody copies you is, as you put together the system of your company and you pull together all the various parts and pieces of the puzzle and you put it together into a system, that can give you a competitive advantage. I mean, think about this. If I asked you, why is Walmart so successful? You could go through, and I'm sure as a class assignment, you and your teammates could sit down, draft a list of all these things here and all those things there. Well, think about it. Don't you think that Walmart's competitors have drafted the same list? Why is Walmart so successful? And the people at Target are writing it all down. Okay, well, they have an idea of all the different parts and pieces. Oh, it's their supply chain, and it's this and it's that, etc. But even though they know the parts and the pieces, because they don't know how Walmart puts it together, how do you make these puzzle pieces fit and fit well, it's hard for them to copy. It's easy to copy the pieces. It's hard to copy the system. I think in an earlier class we talked about copying the parts is a lot easier than copying the system as a whole. So the system you put together, that might also help you to sustain your competitive advantage, so nobody can copy you. One other thing too I'll mention here with regard to differentiation, and we'll go to the next topic, is there are a lot of niceties about differentiation, but one of them, maybe a couple of them, one, if you're the only one selling this thing, it allows you to charge a little higher price for it. Think about it. Doesn't Apple charge a little higher price for its computers than most of the other computer companies do? You can usually charge a little bit of a higher price. Also, if you're the only one serving a certain market or whatever, I'm in the market, I only like blue computers or whatever. Well, if you're the only one making it, or if you're the first one to make blue computers, maybe we have some sort of loyalty. Hey, you came to my rescue. I'm going to be loyal. So you tend to find the companies who are that are successful with this differentiation strategy oftentimes have fairly loyal customers. they've had fairly loyal customers. Again, that helps with higher prices that you might have. Well, let's go to the third of these generic strategies. It's called focused differentiation. Focused differentiation. Now, if you think about it, if you're being different than all the other competitors in the market, you're going back to Apple Computer in the 1990s. You're the only one, at least initially, making blue computers. Well, that's great. But does everybody who's buying a computer want a blue computer? Probably not. There's probably just a portion of that market that wants a blue computer. So what you're going to do is you're going to focus on that portion. And this is called focused differentiation. Focused differentiation, where you're focusing on serving the needs and being different to or for a smaller portion of the market. And that small portion is known by another buzzword. It's known as a segment. You're going after not a small portion, you're going after a segment of the market. So if you're doing this, if your strategy is to go after a segment, this is a type of differentiation. I'm being different, but I recognize not everybody's going to like my difference. So I'm going after only a segment of the market. This strategy is kind of a sub-strategy of differentiation. It's known as a segmentation strategy. There's another buzzword for you, segmentation strategy. And sometimes you see companies go after a really, really, really small segment of the market, which you say, why? Why in the heck would, the market's this big, why are you going after that? First off, let me tell you what that's called, and then talk a little bit about why it works. That really, really small segment of the market is called a niche. A niche. And the buzzword here is you're following a niche strategy, which is kind of a subset of a segmentation strategy, which is a subset of a differentiation strategy. Again, a niche strategy. And you might ask, well, why go after that small segment? Well, maybe that small segment has customers that are paying a bundle for it. Maybe that small segment's really, really loyal. Maybe you're the only one who can fit that segment. There's no other competition to go into that segment. So you may find that there are reasons to go after that really small segment. A good example of this is look at, say, for example, Rolls-Royce. Now, they're in the luxury car market. So already you have the car market, and then we're going into a segment of the car market, the luxury car market. But they're not just going to anybody, in luxury. They're not going to the Mercedes and the BMWs and the Lexus and the Cadillac or whatever. They're going to an even smaller segment of it. People really want to spend a lot of money for a car, and that would be Rolls-Royce. So Rolls-Royce is kind of following a niche strategy. Yes, it's differentiation. Yes, it's segmentation. But they're going after that really small strategy or small segment, and that's called a niche strategy. Well, let's go to the fourth and the final of the regular generic strategies. Again, we have a hybrid we'll get to, but the fourth and the final of the regular, and this is called focused cost leadership. Focused cost leadership. So what we're talking about here is you're trying to lower your costs, and you keep your costs down, same as cost leadership before, but you're not trying to be the low-cost provider in the whole industry. You're trying to be the low-cost provider in a small portion, in a segment of that industry. You're going to focus on that segment, so this is called focused cost leadership. Focused cost leadership. So again, you're not going to be a cost leader in the whole market, just in that segment. And a good example of a cost leadership strategy in a segment is how about Dollar General or some of these dollar stores you have. Okay, we're going into the market of retail, brick and mortar type stores, and then in that we're going into the discount stores, and then in the discount stores we're just going to people who want to pay $1, a couple of dollars or whatever. So we're kind of almost following a niche strategy. But the main reason we're here is we're going to keep our costs down. We're going to sell low-cost stuff. We're not going to sell it to everybody. We're going to sell it to the buyers who like to go into these dollar stores or whatever. So that is a focused cost leadership strategy. We're not trying to be the low-cost leader of everybody. We're not going out and we're not going to compete with Walmart and Amazon and everything else like that. We're just going to go ahead and compete against some of the others in this low-cost dollar market that we have here. Well, the fifth and a final of these generic strategies is a hybrid of them. Let's not just do one of these. Maybe we can do two or three of them, a hybrid of them. So it's using more than one generic strategy. But Michael Porter, in this article, again, What is Strategy, says something pretty interesting about this. You want to be really careful. You've heard of the phrase, a key to success. Michael has a phrase, a key to failure. And he says that businesses that try to follow more than one of these generic strategies at one time, try to position themselves in two different positions in a marketplace at the same time, oftentimes find that that's a key to failure. A key to failure. Let's talk a little bit about this. He says if you try to position yourself in two spots in the marketplace, oh, I want to be the low-cost provider and I want to be a high-quality provider, whatever, etc. If you're trying to be in two positions at once, he calls that by a buzzword, a buzz phrase. If you don't want to know this, it's called straddling. Straddling, S-T-R-D-D-L-I-N-G. S-T-R-D-D-L-I-N-G. I've had some students write T-T, straddling, but it's D. It's like a saddle, but with a straddling. And that's you're straddling a fence or whatever. You're trying to be in two places at once. And again, he says it tends to be a key to failure. Let me give you some of the reasons, and his article will go on with some other reasons too, but a couple of the reasons. Oftentimes you find that if you try to be in two positions in a market at the same time, there is an incompatible reputation. Oh, you get the reputation for being the low-cost provider over here, and yet in this market you're trying to have a reputation of being a quality provider, the luxury provider. Did those two fit? Probably not. Also, he says that when you're trying to be in two different spots in the marketplace, those two positions probably require different resources, processes, etc. So the processes and resources that fit over here don't necessarily fit over there. And fit is important. Remember, I said you want to pick a strategy that fits. Well, here you're not necessarily fitting. So let me give you a quick example of straddling where it did lead to failure, but then also give you an exception. Because notice he says often a key to failure. He's not saying it's always a key to failure. The case I have for you talks about a luxury automobile maker in the United States, not luxury automobile manufacturer in the United States, back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, known as Packard, P-A-C-K-A-R-D, P-A-C-K-A-R-D, Packard. And Packard was a luxury automobile. In fact, in the United States, up until probably sometime in the 1950s, people who were really, really rich, the Rockefellers and the Hillmans and the Kennedys or whatever, if they wanted to buy a motor vehicle that told everybody, hey, I'm really, really rich, they wanted to buy that, top-of-the-line luxury car, they probably bought a Packard. Packard, in many ways, was handcrafted, etc. And if you get a chance to go to some of the old, auto shows around your area, check out a Packard, and particularly the Packards in the 30s and the 40s. Really luxury cars, very, very nice. So let's say that Packard positioned itself in the marketplace to be, a high-end luxury car maker. After World War II ended, and we brought back all the soldiers and sailors, etc., that we had, Congress passed something that was called the GI Bill, GI for General Issue, but it was a bill to help all these soldiers and sailors, etc., Marines or whatever, who were coming back. And as part of this GI Bill to help all these military people who were coming back home after fighting, for a couple of years overseas, one of the things that they put in the bill was they basically paid for college for these people. They either gave you free college or they paid a huge scholarship and reduced, etc. So an interesting happened after World War II in the mid-1940s to late 1940s. Lots of people went to college who never would have gone to college. They never would have had the money, they wouldn't have had the time, etc., but they certainly wouldn't have had the money. But now that the government was either paying for it or paying for it in a good portion of it, all of a sudden lots of people started going to college. And when they got out of college, they didn't want to go and get the job that they would have had if they had not gone to college, get some sort of low-paying job. They went out and they got jobs that paid fairly well. I mean, you weren't going to be rich or whatever. And one of the things that this did is it really helped to create a booming middle class in the United States. Lots of people all of a sudden started having some discretionary income. They were making more money than before. Well, if you think about it, when you graduate from college, you probably have a wish list of lots of things you'd like to buy once you get your job and you start making some money. And probably on the wish list of many of you is you want to buy a car. Right now you might be driving a used car, maybe a car that your parents gave to you or whatever. And a lot of you are, once I get that job and I start making some money, I want to buy my own car and I want to buy a fairly nice car. Now I might not be able to buy that Mercedes-Benz or something that I was thinking about, but maybe I can buy a really nice Toyota or something like that. Well, that's what happened with these sailors and soldiers and Marines and airmen and whatever that came back. They went out and they started buying cars. And what cars did they buy? Well, they weren't rich, so they're buying middle-class cars. So the middle-class car companies in the United States, Ford and Dodge and Chevy, etc., they're booming. They couldn't make enough cars because the demand was up there. All of a sudden, people had money and they could buy these cars. Well, great, the middle-class car makers are making, money hand over fist. But how about the luxury car makers, and particularly the top of the luxury car makers? Was Packard making a lot more money? No, there's not a whole lot more people buying Packards in the late 40s or early 50s than there were, during the 40s and 30s or whatever. So the people at Packard were sitting around saying, my goodness, look, we're missing the boat here. Look at all these people buying cars. They're not buying ours. So Packard decided to come out with a middle-class car. And they called it, and I forget the specific name for it, but generally speaking, it was called the Baby Packard. The Baby Packard, which at least in theory was priced as a middle-class car. It still was pretty high priced in the middle class, but still in the middle class. So I want you to think about this. Let's say, for example, you are one of these really rich people, again, Rockefeller or something like that. And you're having probably your chauffeur drive you to work, and you're in your Packard, and you want to show everybody how rich you are as you're driving downtown or wherever. And as you're at a traffic light, in the lane next to you, up drives your maid or your butler, and your maid or your butler is driving a Packard. Now it's the Baby Packard, but it's a Packard. Now you're driving a Packard because you want everybody to know you're rich, and now you see your maid and your butler is driving a Packard. The next time you go to buy a car, and again you want everybody to know how rich you are going to buy a Packard? Probably not. You're going to go out and get that Mercedes or Ferrari or something, right? And that's what happened. The market dropped out for Packard. A lot of the rich people stopped buying Packards, and because they stopped buying Packards, Packard eventually went out of business. Now Packard, I still think, makes engines or airplane engines or something like that, but Packard Automobile, it's gone. In fact, I was hearing, I think even recently, that one of the largest vacant buildings in Detroit right now is the closed Packard plant from back in the 1950s or whatever, when they closed it down, doing at least in small part or in some part to the Baby Packard. Now there's probably a lot of reasons that Packard went out of business, but at least one of them, according to Michael Porter, is hey, they straddled. They're trying to be in the the luxury car market and the middle class car market at the same time, and we had this incompatible, at least reputation, probably some other things too. But I did mention to you that there is an exception to this. Straddling doesn't always lead to failure. It can be successful. So to show this, let me ask you, can you think of any middle-class car makers today that also make a luxury brand? Any middle-class car makers today that also make a luxury brand? Well, think about it. You have Toyota, middle class. It makes Lexus, luxury brand. You have Honda, middle class. It makes Acura, luxury brand. You have General Motors. It makes Chevys, middle class, but it also makes Cadillacs. I'll give you just one more, and there's others. I don't mean to leave anybody out, but just one more, for example. You have Volkswagen, right? Middle class. It also owns Audi and Porsche, upper class. So how can those companies be successful? And obviously they're straddling. They're in the middle class market and the luxury market too. Are they doing something that Packard didn't? Think about that. I just might ask that on a quiz. What's the difference? Why are they successful and Packard wasn't? How were they able to straddle and be successful when most companies aren't successful when they straddle? So just a question for you. You might want to take a look at that as you prepare for the quiz. Well, let's go to the final topic for today. Remember I told you there were two. One was talking about strategic positioning, and that was all the stuff that we just talked about. The next topic, the final topic for today, is what is the value of your value proposition? You have a value proposition. Oh, I'm located in this part of the market and I do this and that and the other. What is the value of your proposition? Well, the author says you basically want to ask yourself a couple of questions. The first question you want to ask yourself is, well, who's my target market? Am I going after middle-class car buyers, etc.? Who's my target market? What are their problems? What problems do they have? And with regard to those problems, does my product solve them in some way, make them easier? Do I have a solution for their problems? If you have a solution for their problems, there's your value proposition. And the value of your value proposition is how much is your solution saving them money? You know, how happy are they with it? Now, another thing, though, that you want to add here with regard to maybe the second question, besides, you know, who's my target market and what's the problems, is how am I different from my competitors as I provide them with their solutions, as I come up with my products, etc. How am I different? And, you know, that's related in a lot of different ways. So first off, do your customers like the way you're different? Do they like the blue computer as opposed to an almond? It also relates to, is it easy to copy? Can I easily make a blue computer? Or is it impossible? Or maybe you have some sort of law, you know, you've got a patent, you're the only one allowed to make blue computers, etc. that you have. Or is it really expensive? Yeah, I can copy it, but my gosh, blue plastic costs 10 times what black plastic costs. And it's not in my budget. So the second question is, how are you different? And is it a way, are you different in a way that not only is attractive to your customers, but is it different in a way that it's going to be hard for your competition to copy you, either impossible or hard or really expensive for them to copy you. The bottom line of this section was a value proposition. Is the author says here, and I think the author has quite a lot of logic in saying this, your value proposition can make or break your business. Your value proposition can make or break your business. If you don't have, if you're not offering value, if you're not proposing value to your potential customers, they're not going to buy from you. They're going to buy from somebody else. What's in it for them? They want to buy something that they see value in, whether it's going to make them money, it's going to satisfy some needs that they have. You know, it could be even a need of ego. Oh, I want to drive a, you know, a Lexus as opposed to a Toyota. So what you want to do here is keep in mind that this concept of value proposition, very important. It can make or break you, and it's very much related to your strategic position. Well, that finishes up my my lecture on this topic. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you picked up some things that might help you. If you have any questions, let me know. But with that said, I'm going to end the lecture for now. We'll move on to another chapter, but I hope you have a good evening coming up, and I look forward to seeing you in the near future. Bye-bye.